And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 124th episode, recorded on Wednesday, August 28, 2024. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, joined tonight by my co-host, Kathy Amos, along with a special guest, Casey Kasliner of the USC Daily Trojan. Tonight, we will be previewing one of IU's newest Big Ten opponents in the preseason number 2, USC Trojans. But as usual, we start the show with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Kathy, I'm going to go back to August 22nd. The Portland Sea Dogs of Portland, Maine, the Boston Red Sox AA team, held Mackenzie Holmes night. And MAC bobbleheads were given out, and she threw out the first pitch. And that was our Hoosier Proud banner moment. It's brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes the Assembly Call and Crimson Cast, and now the Dribble Drive. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelly School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, that's HOME23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And in news around the program, it's been a little bit of a slow cycle since our last episode, but Kylie Durkee was named the Director of Athletic Performance for the women's program. And the Hoosiers added a player to the roster. Valentina Kadletsova from the Czech Republic has joined the team as these last couple of weeks. So, Kathy, let's throw it over to you and get your thoughts about the news, the banner moment, anything that's on your mind here.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Good evening. And special thanks for Casey joining us here tonight as well. So, yeah, I think, again, off season, so a little slow on the news side. I was a little surprised to see us add another player with Valentina, but excited for her. She's another international player that we've added to our program. Played for the Czech Republic national team. So she's got some nice experience coming into the team. I don't think she's expected to be a rotation player and really more somebody to add to our practice squad for now. But, hopeful that she'll be able to develop over the next couple of years into somebody that does contribute into our rotation. But either way, she is now a Hoosier and very happy to have her on board. Also, just excited about Mackenzie Holmes night that they had out in Portland. As you mentioned, Jeff, in your banner moment, it was a great addition. If you haven't seen any videos out there, folks, I'd go out and watch it. It looked like she was having a lot of fun, almost only signing autographs and not watching much of the game. So happy to see Portland has really kind of embraced Mackenzie out there, even though she hasn't played for them. So those are some of my quick thoughts, Jeff.
I like that. And we want to intro our special guest here tonight. Casey is joining us from USC Daily Trojan. He's the beat writer for the USC women's basketball team. And Casey, welcome to Doing the Work, and tell us a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got to USC.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. Like you said, I've been covering USC sports ever since I got here. I'm a sophomore currently, so got here last year, and I've always been interested in sports media and kind of covering teams and kind of looking at the analytical angles of the teams and just the trends and everything. And I think it's really interesting with, when I got here, of course, USC basketball kind of just took off, really. There's no other way to say it. Just, the things that Lindsay Gottlieb, the head coach, is doing is just incredible. So I think right now it's really exciting for USC women's basketball and USC sports as a whole, because they're adding a lot of things, new facilities, and obviously it's just growing and being in the Big Ten in every sport. So I'm really excited for all that and covering it as a student, but also as, trying to become a professional in the industry. So thank you so much for having me on, and I'm glad to be here.
All right. So Casey, just a little fun thing, person on the men's side of our Back Home Network podcast, Assembly Call did. He has been taking quotes from different players and coaches and throwing them into AI and coming up with some music. So we like to play a little clip of one of them that he created from Mackenzie Holmes from our team from the last previous 5 years. So this is a little bit of Jared's AI song that we have from Mackenzie. This was my last game. Maybe. StreamYard is not cooperating tonight. Okay, well, we're not going to play that. We're just kidding.
It played.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything. Okay, well, there we go. I think that's good enough, Jeff. I think
you can tell we're not. Casey can right off the bat tell we're not professionals at this. This is how we do it.
No worries.
We did not go to school for this.
Hey, so, as I mentioned, you're talking about, and Casey, I want to kind of lead this into the first question. We'll go to you here, and I'll let Kathy follow up or ask a different question. But when I was growing up in the 80s, the USC women's program was one of the premier programs in the country. Cheryl Miller, others who came through there, they won 2 national titles, a runner-up in a 4-year period. They were a regular appearance in the NCAA tournament. From 1982 to 1995, they had 12 NCAA appearances. But after that, from 1995 to 2022, if I did my math correctly, they only made 4 NCAA tournament appearances. In 2022 is when Lindsey Gottlieb showed up. So that leads me into my question. And you've been around the program for a year now and gotten to see what's going on. What about Lindsey Gottlieb has made this, what was once kind of a blue blood program for women back to a place that's a destination? You have Juju Watkins, you have a very solid recruiting class coming in. So just what is it about Lindsey Gottlieb, for example, that makes her the right coach for this program right now?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think really the way I'd characterize the way Gottlieb coaches is she's just not afraid to coach the way she wants to coach. And I think we see a lot in college sports, with NIL and just personalities. A lot of coaches will coach a certain way to sort of attend to, a certain system. But I think Gottlieb is just so innovative in her own way. She doesn't try to pull off anything that's, any out of her bag of tricks that's, not going to work or fit a system. She has her own way of coaching. And the way that's been, ever since she got here, but more specifically last year, because Juju Watkins joined last year, is build the team around Juju and kind of have her on the perimeter, have her be the main point of focus, but don't be afraid to kind of integrate the other players to some extent, on the perimeter and inside. And I think for Lindsey as well, has so much experience in women's basketball. And not to say that the previous coaches didn't, but I think with Lindsey, she's just so, she's not afraid to tell it how it is. You'll be in the press conferences. She's not coach speaking. She's not making up excuses. She's saying what actually happened, and she's not afraid to hold players accountable. So obviously, I'm not in the practices every single day. I'm not, behind the scenes, but I think from what I've observed, Lindsey just, she's honest. She coaches the way that the players want to be coached, but she's also at the same time not afraid to, integrate her own strategies and not necessarily fit a system that doesn't fit. So that's how I'd answer that.
Yep. Yeah, I would say that, looking at Lindsey Gottlieb's record and her history, that feeds right into that, right? So while she's only been at USC 4 years, she has had 15 years overall coaching. She also coached Cal for 8 seasons and UC Santa Barbara for 3 seasons. And between those 2 teams, she led them to 8 different NCAA appearances, including and as well as the WNIT with Santa Barbara. So, she has proven that she's had some success here in building teams and getting them into the NCAAs, and that's continued on here with her experiences at USC, where she's now gone to the NCAAs now 2 years, including last year going to the Elite 8 and losing only to UConn. So, definitely some good history there and some background. Plus, she was a player at Brown, so she understands what it's like to be a college player. So I think all of what you're saying, Casey, really is just bolstered when you look at her actual coaching record as well.
Definitely.
Casey, I think along with that, you're talking a little bit about Lindsey Gottlieb, kind of coaching her own way. A lot of similarities. I think we hear that. I think of the same thing about Terry Morin here at IU. She does a lot of that and she's not, and if you talk to the players, and we've been lucky enough to have a few of them on over the last couple of years, but they all talk about it's a family atmosphere, and Terry and the staff are honest. That's one of those things that when you talk with them about what the recruiting trips were like, or when they're in the program for 4 to 5 years, it kind of is that same thing. I don't know how much you get to talk to the individual players, but do you get kind of that same vibe with the USC program right now?
Yeah, I actually do talk to the players pretty regularly during the season, and I completely get that vibe. They're calling her Coach G. It's it's a family vibe. It's not, this is my boss. It's really, this is my mentor. This is somebody who's going to oversee my basketball career and try to elevate me to levels that, I've never seen before. And for USC, it's a national title that they haven't been to in, 40, haven't won in 40 years plus. So I think for the players, they see Lindsay as a mentor, somebody, just from talking to them, somebody that is going to help them achieve their goals. And I think Lindsay has goals too. And she's proved that so far with, just elevating this program. So definitely, I definitely could see those comparisons between the IU system and USC, definitely.
Yep. Jeff, I was thinking, do we want to talk a little bit about what happened with USC last year? And I thought that might be a good segue into talking to Casey a little bit about style of play for USC and get some takes on that. So if it's all right, I'll cover that out real quick. So from a team perspective, last year, USC finished 29-6 overall, 13-5 in their conference. They were second behind Stanford there. All of their losses outside of the loss to UConn and the tournament came in their conference play. And we've talked a little bit about how strong the Pac-12 was last year. So 4 of their 5 losses during the regular season were all to ranked opponents. Number 2, UCLA, number 2, Utah, number 2, Colorado, and number 18, Utah. The one surprising loss might have been Washington at home, where they lost by 3 points in there. The interesting thing with UCLA is they did turn around and beat them later in the year. So they did split that home and home that they had with UCLA last year. From just a quick stats, I'll just cover some of the high level ones here. And then I would like to hear from Casey on his thoughts on style of play. But offensively, they did, they shot very well, or scored pretty well right at 75 points per game. That was 31st in the country. They had 14 games where they scored over 80 and 3 games where they scored over 90. Defensively as well, they're really strong on that side of the court, holding their opponents to 62.5 points per game. That was 120th in the country. So they had an average scoring margin of 12.4 and a tempo of 70 possessions per game. So that's just some quick stats there, Casey. If you have any others you want to throw at us, if you have handy or anything like that, but really just in general, I would like to hear from you. Do you think Coach Gottlieb is more about offensive, defensive minded, a little bit both, fast play? It seems like from the stats, but tell us a little bit about their style of play.
Yeah, I think from style of play, like from covering last year, I think it's just a really, at least offensively, just high motor, put Rhea Marshall down the middle, have Juju leads the offense. I don't think there's any surprise to that. And then, last year, and we can talk about the departures, I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it was a lot, Juju lead down the court, and then, have usually Caleb Padilla on the wing and Mackenzie Forbes on the other side. And both of them were 2 of USC's best 3-point shooters, up there with Juju. So, they were a high 3-point shooting team, but also not afraid to kind of flood the middle, because Rhea Marshall, she was very good at drawing fouls, and, we'll talk about her defense as well, but I think her sort of underrated aspect of her game is drawing fouls. And so Watkins' ability to see the court was what was very important in their offense, because, when they didn't have the wings open, which didn't always happen, and plenty of those games where you're playing against, Pac-12 teams, that 7 of them made the tournament, Rhea Marshall was kind of the game changer in those games, because she, was always finding a way to get open. She's, a tall player. She's, agile and elusive down in the paint. So I think really to characterize it, the style of play is, very cerebral, very high motor. It's always going to be kind of feed Juju when she's open. But they're obviously not afraid to find the other options. And that's why they were so dangerous this year. On defense, like I said, Rhea Marshall was kind of the anchor of it, but they would sort of have Juju collect at half court. She was very good at getting steals. She could get blocks as well. She would kind of trail into the paint and get a lot of blocks that way. And they would also use Clarice Akinwafo in a lot of different situations, and she's, I believe, 6'6". So her ability to come in crucial moments, especially kind of heading into the tournament, was really important on the USC defensive side. That kind of woke up and got a lot better in March. So, yeah.
And Casey, just real quickly, Kathy mentioned their tempo was only 70.5 possessions a game. That was ranked 164th by her hoop stats. but they scored roughly 75, 74.9 officially according to her hoop stats. That was 31st. So maybe talk a little bit about the efficiency of the offense for USC last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the efficiency came off of, timeouts and when they were really able to draw up plays, because I felt like the flaw with the team was when they got in a rush and when they got when they were forced to get into play quickly and not really have, set screens and kind of do their own thing. That's where they sometimes would be inefficient, take bad shots. I mean, Juju Watkins is a great player, but, her shooting percentage in some games where she'd even score 25 points would sometimes be very low. But I think overall, like the way Gottlieb was able to kind of calm them down in timeouts was how they kind of led to, how the team led to having that great efficiency in a lot of moments. But that's an interesting stat, though. I didn't have that one off the top of my head, but I definitely think that, they're a team that makes a lot of shots. They're a team that has a lot of good 3-point shooters and a lot of good mid-range shooters. And they didn't necessarily have the height of like the Cameron Brinks and some of the other teams, but they were very smart when it came to driving to the hoop and setting up their kind of operations down low. So that's what kind of led to the efficiency, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think we've mentioned her a lot already, and we'd be remiss if we don't go ahead and dive into some Juju Watkins love here. So Juju was just a ton of fun. I wish I could have seen her play more last year. So I guess now in the Big Ten, I'll get my opportunity. But so for our listeners out there who maybe aren't aware, Juju Watkins was a freshman last year. She'll be a 6'2" sophomore guard. Last year, she averaged 27.1 points per game. 7.3 rebounds per game, 3 assists. She shot 40% from the field, 32% from field three-point land, and 85% from free throw. She made the first team All-American. She was Freshman of the Year. She was an Ann Myers Drysdale Award winner. She made the All Pac-12, and she was the second leading scorer in the country, not for just freshmen, but overall. She also set a record for freshmen for most points in a season. So, I think that the storyline for me that I always hear about Juju is how she's going to be the next Caitlin Clark. And, I as much as I love Juju Watkins and watching her play, I'm going to be I don't mean this to come out the wrong way. I hope she's not, because I just think there's so many wonderful players in women's basketball that I hope that we can spread that focus around as much. But if it does turn out the way it is absolutely deserved, she's just absolutely fun to watch. And, hearing, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of the couple of the transfers that USC have coming in. I know one of them was quoted as saying, "I just want to play with Juju." And so she has a lot of that it factor that you're looking for in terms of what you want to see in women's basketball and in terms of having a star to watch. But what overall are your thoughts, Casey? I know we've talked a lot about her, but what kind of expectations, because it was such a phenomenal freshman year, what kind of expectations are there on her now going into her sophomore year? Do you think that production is going to be repeated? Is it something where maybe she won't be as expected to score 27 points, or what are the overall expectations coming in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think personally the expectations are going to be elevated just because, last season she made it to a certain point. She was obviously very disappointed in herself and the team, and in a constructive way. I was at the press conference after the UConn game, and, she was crying, and it was a moment where you could see she was generating that focus already for the next season. But I also think you look at the departures for this team, she fed off the energy from Mackenzie Forbes and Kayla Padilla and even Taylor Bigby, who wasn't necessarily an every night starter. But I think and I'm sure we'll talk about the additions, but I think for Juju, she's just such an explosive player. I think a lot of people wonder, like, when is she going to get fatigued? Like, when is Juju going to run out of gas? Because I don't think that's necessarily what happened last season, because, she made the Elite Eight and you're facing off against Paige Beckers. Like, there's not much more you can do. And it was a close game. It's not like they got blown out to UConn. It's the Elite Eight and she's a freshman. But I think really, like, we saw at certain points she was getting fatigued. Like, there was a certain game where she had to exit at halftime and go on an IV. And she, is playing so many minutes. It's just the expectations as a freshman. And I mean, we can't really deny the obvious too. Like, being in LA, it's such a big basketball town, probably in a different way of Indiana, like not necessarily the historical, Hoosiers and all that, but like the media presence, like LeBron's in town and Bronny's on the men's team at the same time, and Isaiah Collier, the number one men's recruit. Like the focus on Juju, a lot of people wondered, I would be at the press conferences, is it too much pressure? Can she handle all this as an 18-year-old? And clearly she did as a freshman. I just think as a sophomore, is she going to kind of digress and kind of fit a little bit more into a system that Gottlieb is kind of, developing at this point, especially with a lot of highly touted recruits and transfers? Or is she still going to be that alpha player that, we saw last year? I honestly don't know, but at the end of the day, like, she's such an explosive player. She can get to the rack. She can shoot from outside. She shoots a lot of free throws, which some people critique that style of basketball. I personally respect it. She's able to get to the rack. She's, she doesn't show signs of slowing down ever, really. And so, that's kind of my analysis on Juju Watkins. I just think the expectations for her, especially in the scope of women's basketball, where she's expected to play 2 to 3 more years, I think they're going to be even higher, especially coming off of a postseason loss where they're not hoisting a trophy in March Madness. So yeah,
that's a great point. Just to point out, she did average 35 minutes per game, so it definitely was there. So sorry, Jeff.
Well, I was going to say, kind of wanted to ask a question more back to kind of a team oriented for Casey a little bit. We talked about UCLA a couple of weeks ago, and they dealt with some injuries last year, and so their bench was kind of thin. One of the criticisms of the IU women has been not very deep bench over the years. We thought 6, maybe 7 players at the most. A lot of minutes burned by the starters. So, and I also say this before I ask the question to Casey, she may score 30 a game this year. But I also am the opinion that if Juju scored with the people that had been brought in, the recruits and the transfers, if Juju averages 24, she could still actually be better this year, even though she may average 24. So, but Casey, kind of back to that, was depth a little bit of an issue for the Trojans last year, or was it just perhaps Juju, it was Juju just racking up major minutes?
I think it was the latter, pretty much. I think depth was sort of an issue from the role player standpoint, just because, like I said, like Mackenzie Forbes, was criminally underrated last year, just because she's in the shadow of Juju and goes on to get drafted in the WNBA. Caitlin Davis, same story. Those are big players, but they don't have necessarily the bandwidth to play 40 minutes a game like Juju does. And so I think depth was sort of an issue in some games, like those Stanford games, like those UCLA games. But like you said, I mean, I completely agree. When they bring in, 6 recruits that, are all 4-star or above, plus 2, top 10 transfers in the country, that completely, diminishes maybe the need for Juju to put up 30 points a game. And I think it's great. I don't think she should have to, because everyone knows at this point, she's put her name on the map that she is an elite women's basketball player. She's going, probably going to be the number 1, pick in the WNBA draft, assuming everything goes well from here on out. And, she has really nothing. She does have stuff to prove, but she doesn't have to prove that she has a place in this lineup. And so I think with the additions, I think really, like you said, if she drops off by 5, 6, 7 points, I don't see that as a problem at all if other players are supplementing that. So with that being said, I think, yes, depth was at times an issue, especially in late game situations where not only is Juju getting tired, but the whole starting lineup is. And they had to supplement that with some, players off the bench that just, weren't bad or anything, just, weren't necessarily up to speed on everything. So I do think that depth could be improved, but I think Gottlieb's recruiting, profile has her resume has grown. Let's just say that, and she's gotten so many great players for this upcoming year to supplement that.
Yep. Well, I think that's just a wonderful segue. Well, let's go ahead and start talking about some of those newcomers, because there's quite a few. And so let's start with the transfers in, and I'll start here with Kiki Arafin, who is coming in from Stanford. She was the number 1 ranked transfer in the transfer portal. She'll be a graduate forward. She played 3 seasons at Stanford, where she averaged 19.4 points per game, 11 rebounds per game, and she shot 54.6% from the field and 33.3% from three-point land. Just another long list, like Juju already had in 1 year, but in her 3 years, she's racked up quite a number of awards here. So Katrina McLean Award last year. the HM All-American, Pac-12 Most Improved Player, All Pac-12 team. She was the Ball Dogs MVP all last year as a freshman. She made the All Pac-12 freshman. And then as a recruit coming in 2021, she was the 19 recruit overall. And I think she's kind of lived up to that. To round out the transfer class, they had Talia von Oelhofen from Oregon State. She was the number 10 ranked transfer in that class. So she is a 5'11", also graduate. She's a guard. She played 4 seasons at Oregon State, where she averaged 10.7 points per game, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. She shot 38.7% from the field, 32% from 3. She also made the All Pac-12 in both 2024 and 22. She was in the Maui Classic All Tournament team in 22, and overall in her 2020 class, she was the number 14 overall recruit. I ran through those really quick, but I think in my head, you take those two and you add Juju in, those might be the best trio we have, not just in the Big Ten, but in the nation. I think that is just quite a force to reckon with. And I just hats off to Coach Gottlieb for getting those 2 transfers in again to surround Juju with some more talent, to Jeff's point, which might take off some of the pressure. But Casey, talk about some of the excitement and expectations for those 2 transfers coming in.
Yeah, well, I think the thing with Kiki to point out is she improved so much. Like, that was the talk of the town on such a good Stanford team. She went from 6.7 points per game in 2022-23 to 19.4 the year following this past season. So I think my number one question is that going to be sustainable? But if it is, I mean, it's just such an exciting addition, because I think the thing with Kiki is, although she brings that explosiveness, that scoring ability that Juju has, she's not a 3-point shooter. She is more of an inside kind of mid-range player. And I don't want to say that Trojans didn't have that last year, but they didn't have kind of I grew up a Warriors fan. I'm from the Bay Area, like a Sean Livingston type player that you can just rely on for, mid-range and kind of just being reliable inside the arc. And the Trojans were, to me, like, kind of on the opposite ends, on every possession. It was either, it sometimes felt like it was either a 3 or driving to the rack. They didn't always have that mid-range. So I'm really excited for that, for Irioffen to thrive in the mid-range and also just feed Juju, and also kind of mold into that Mackenzie Forbes role of kind of guard forward, being able to kind of stretch the floor, feed opportunities and feed the guards. With Talia von Oelhofen, still learning that one too. She, I think is a great addition. She's not, the flashiest player. She's not, she doesn't bring the stardom necessarily of Juju or Kiki, but she is just so good at, offensively playing on and off the ball. She's going to be that 2-guard player that Kayla Padilla was last year for USC. And that's, for her, that's going to mean a lot of feeding Juju. Like, I could see Talia putting up like 6-7 assists per game. Like, I could easily see that, because she's just so smart with passing. And she's also a very, cerebral player. We've seen a lot of games where she's, taking control of games. The UCLA game from last year is one that comes to mind, when Oregon State beat them on a buzzer beater. But I think for Talia, like, not necessarily like I said, not necessarily the flashiest player, not a Kiki star level player in that regard, but still a top 10 transfer and somebody who I think is going to feed Juju a lot more than we saw last year, because I think Kayla Padilla as a 2-guard was just a different type of player, not in any worse way. She was just more of a 3-point shooting kind of, she was similar to Juju in that way. And she was also an explosive player. So I think having kind of an opposites attract sort of model where she can feed Juju and kind of, roll that out is really important to have. So I think the 2 transfers are perfect fits.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Casey, you look at a couple of the players they lost, and Forbes and Padilla especially. You kind of plug in 2 obviously all Pac-12 performers to take their place. And I want to say this and kind of get your thoughts as well. With Kiki, she averaged 19 a game last year, but she was still somewhat overshadowed by Cameron Brink. So. That's right. And so I think, and I understand that, the number 2 pick in the WNBA draft, or 3, whichever it was, but I think that also bodes well for USC. I think, Kiki wanted to play with Juju. She wanted that opportunity to make a deep run, but she knows she's comfortable with maybe perhaps realizing she's not always going to be the first option. And I think that's important on a team that already has an established star like Juju.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I think to that point, like, with all due respect to Kiki, like, after her second season where she's only averaging, under 7 points per game, like, she wasn't being talked about. And
Right.
now, okay, she has a very good year at Stanford. It kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier. She needs to, if she wants to make the WNBA and be, a national champion with USC and have all these aspirations, she is going to have some sustainability. And to be honest, like, at a Stanford program that just lost Tara Vanderveer and Cameron Brink, like, yeah, she could have been the star there, but I think going to USC where it's just going to be such a star-studded cast, not only that, but in a new conference with a coach who clearly knows what she's doing, in an NIL market that is growing just so rapidly. I think for her, like, not only was it a basketball decision, but it was also like, how do I want to grow my name? And I think that's why a lot of players choose USC, not just women's basketball, but other sports too. It's like, got to remember, this is Los Angeles. She's a Los Angeles native. Like, I think there were a lot of factors at play off the court. But I think at the end of the day, like she has to prove that she can score 20 points a game multiple years in a row and not just have it be a one-off. But I do agree. She was in the shadow of Cameron Brink and still was able to, put up those numbers. So I don't have any doubt that she can do it this year. I just think that she's going to want to prove herself on a team that needs mid-range shooting. So, yeah.
Yep. Well, that's great. And, great for USC and their transfer class, but that's not where we stop with newcomers, right? You have the number one ranked recruiting class coming in terms of freshmen. So 3 really headlining, but 4 in total. So Kennedy Smith, the number 6 ranked recruit overall, is a 6'1" guard or wing. She is also a California native. Kaylee Heckel, 5'9" guard, number 13 ranked recruit, New York City native. Avery Howe, a 6'0" guard, number 16 ranked recruit. So already you're looking at 3 top 20 freshmen coming in. And then you add on as well, Vivian, I'm probably not going to get this right. So you can help me with her last name. Yeah. You got it? Yeah,
it's Iwuchukwu.
Okay. Yeah, so she was the number 47 ranked recruit. So you got four players ranked in the top 50 coming in to round out your freshman class already. And from things I've read about, at least a little bit, and this is where I'm hoping you can fill in. I don't think they're expected to just sit there and learn the system. I think that especially Kennedy Smith and Kaylee Heckel are expected to come in and contribute. But Jeff, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I will say this, Kathy. I only put 4 on the run sheet, the 4 in the top 50, but I think it was 6 overall coming in. So, and also Avery Howe, I don't remember if you mentioned, I was kind of looking at the comments in the YouTube chat. But Avery Howe was a kid that had IU in her top 5. She was in the last 5 IU was. So, this is kind of be a little bit bittersweet if she sees action against IU this year, knowing that we were that, kind of close to getting Avery Howe. But Casey, go ahead and answer the question that Kathy had.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so it is 6 recruits. All are 4-star or above, 3 of which are 5-star. And, I mean, I think you brought up a really good point because we saw this with Juju last year. Like, a lot of people were probably wondering, like, okay, USC's coming off, a tournament with, Gottlieb in 2023. Where does Juju fit into the system? Is she going to, sit out? Is she going to, and we just saw, like she hit the ground running. Right. And I think that's what Gottlieb is able to do. She's able to integrate players. We also saw a lot of grad transfers last year that really shined and didn't feel, out of place. So I think when you look at the incoming freshmen, I don't have any doubt, like you said, that they're going to start right away and kind of relieve the stress on the shoulders of Juju and Kiki when, it's a close game and there's 10 minutes left. Like, I seriously think that there are players that are going to be expected to make big impacts, especially those 3 5-stars. But I think too, you look at it and they need height. And they have Rhea Marshall, in the middle, and she's just shown that she can be a workhorse and really put it all out there. But I think that players like Vivian Iwuchukwu, she was kind of the only taller player, of that class, but or of that recruiting class. But I think really for USC, it's going to be like, I really think that they're going to have the players shadow other players, learn behind them. And I'm sure I'll see in practice when that comes around, like Lindsay is not going to be afraid to integrate them into the system. And I talked about that earlier. Like Lindsay will do her own thing, and she's not afraid to have it her way, and it's clearly working. So I think we saw with Juju, like Juju did not miss a step at all. Juju was thrown in right away, and look what happened. She's, a top 2 player in the country. So I think for the newcomers, I think they'll be expected to come in right away. But I think honestly, like when we're thinking about this program, they want to be sustainable past this next year. And so they don't want to overdevelop these players right away. So I think that's going to be a big test. Can these players kind of deal with the fatigue, and especially the travel fatigue of having to play in a Big Ten schedule when you're on the West Coast? So I think they'll definitely be integrated, but we'll see to what degree they actually are.
And Casey, you talked a little bit about her, so I didn't bring her back up, but Rhea Marshall is one that is a 6'4" senior coming back. Is there anybody else coming back? We talked a lot about Kiki and Talia and the incoming freshmen. Is there anybody from last season's roster besides Rhea that we really haven't talked much about that will contribute?
To be honest, like not really, because the main focus of the team last year was, like I said, Juju, but then also those grad transfers. Like they carry the weight of that team, and we saw, Caitlin Davis get drafted to the WNBA. We saw, Mackenzie Forbes. So not really. Like there were some bench players that returned. Taylor Bigby transferred out. So like to answer your question, no, but I don't think that really affects the chemistry. Like I think that would be the big red flag. It's like, how is the chemistry? We can appreciate women's basketball. It's not like a one and done culture. Right. So this chemistry can develop. But I think for the culture that Lindsay has developed, I don't see that being an issue. But no, not really to my knowledge of any that would really pop out to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So, So I'm wondering, Casey, you've got such a nice mix with a couple key returning players between Raya and Juju. You got some really experienced transfers coming in with the 3 we talked about, and then, the 2 transfers that we talked about, and then the freshmen coming in as well. Have you heard in terms of like from the team, have they started setting, at least publicly talking about public team goals that they have for themselves? Obviously they went out in the Elite 8 last year, and I'm sure the easy answer is out there, but there's a lot of expectations. But from a team expectation, have they been talking a little bit about what their goals are for this season?
So they haven't had like a public media day like this season yet, but I will tell you this. When I covered March Madness, for USC this, past year, the moment they lost to UConn in the Elite 8, like the main focus was how can we build a sustainable winning program at USC? Because, Jeff, you talked about earlier in the show, like this is a program that was just not being talked about and not relevant for so long. And so I don't think USC is going into every year with the expectation that, oh, hey, we're going to win a national championship every year, but rather, can we be like, an Iowa of recent years, or, just these power South Carolina? Can we be talked about? Can we be relevant every single year, regardless of how we're doing? Not to say if they were losing every single game, they should be talked about, but like USC wants to put itself back on the map. And so the moment they lost, to UConn in the Elite 8, the main shift was, we know players are leaving. We know that, the team is going to look a lot different next year. But the bottom line is Gottlieb and Juju are going to be here for sure. And those are 2 characters that are going to build the culture of this program. Juju probably 2 to 3 more years. Gottlieb, who knows, 10 more years? Beats me. But I think the main goal that I can think of is building this program out to be one that gets top recruits every single year. And this is not a one-off thing. I'll keep you updated if I hear anything, in the next few weeks when I'm actually allowed to get more coverage in, but that's kind of what I've heard.
Absolutely.
Casey, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit and because you're going to have to make a choice here. But you look at their 3 people who basically graduated, ran out of eligibility. Mackenzie Forbes averaged 14 a game, 34 minutes. Kayla Padilla, you talked a little bit about already, 8 points a game, 31 minutes a game. Caitlin Davis, 6'2", 6 points a game, 26 minutes. Of those 3, Who do you think is missed the most?
That's a really good question. So you said Mackenzie Forbes, Caitlin Davis, and Kayla Padilla?
Yes.
I think it's Mackenzie Forbes with Kayla Padilla a close second. Just because the way Mackenzie was able to change a game. Like when Juju had off nights. Like she's human. Like she would have off nights. She wouldn't play good, certain times, and Mackenzie would go in there and change the game. And she's kind of a 5-tool. Like she can do everything. Maybe not to the degree that Juju can, but she also brought that maturity and experience. She's played at multiple college programs. She also played at Cal, where Lindsay Gottlieb previously coached. Like she knew the system, and so I think her. But I do want to, as an honorable mention, point out Kayla Padilla, because she was a player that, like, you need a 3-pointer, you pass the ball to Kayla Padilla. She was going to hit that corner 3 every time, and so I think she's a close second. But I think Mackenzie's, it's not just her play, like her vocal energy on the court, her ability to change games, kind of get the team back in it mentally when, there were certain games that, Oregon State last year, or the Arizona game last year during the regular season, there were certain points in that game where the team looked mentally out of it, even Juju. And you could see Mackenzie in the huddle along with Coach Gottlieb really putting the energy and fight back into the team. So I think it's got to be Mackenzie Forbes. And that's why she was drafted in the WNBA, because she's, that type of player.
Yeah, those are the 2 players that started all 35 games too for USC as well. So very interesting thoughts there on how they'll be missed. So kind of transitioning a little bit away from talking about players in the team. So just overall, we have you on because, we highlight Indiana, we mainly focus on them, but that goes along with it. We're talking about the Big Ten, and that's why we have you here, because USC is coming into the Big Ten. What are your thoughts, or what you're hearing over in your area in terms of, are they excited about coming into the Big Ten? Obviously sad about the Pac-12 kind of dying away from us. It was such a great conference last year, but are they excited? And just overall, what you're hearing about, you mentioned the travel and how much concern there is on the potential travel schedule that they'll have.
Yeah, great question. I think it's bittersweet for sure, because, we saw last year the Pac-12 in a variety of sports is a thriving conference on the court, on the field, in the pool, wherever it is, but outside of it wasn't, and that's why it fell. And it's such a complicated thing I could talk for hours about, but but to answer your question more directly, it's bittersweet, right? Because the cherished rivalries, and especially we saw in women's basketball last year, like over half the league making the tournament is something that not only is great for West Coast women's basketball, but is great for the Pac-12. And so for it to be the final kind of dance for that was very bittersweet. But I'm not going to shy away from pointing out the positives, which are, it's a huge moneymaker from a TV standpoint, and magnitude of just attention, everything. So I think for players like Juju and Kiki, and players, even at UCLA and other new member schools, like trying to really show the world that they're legitimate, because they are. I think it's huge for them, because the media presence and the NIL and everything is just growing. But like you said, like the travel is certainly a factor, and for these players, I can only imagine how they're going to deal with that, having to balance all that and still be student athletes. I actually have Juju Watkins in one of my classes that I'm going to be at in about half an hour. So might not see her there all the time, but she,
no, probably not.
Yeah, especially during the thick of the regular season. But
that's right.
Yeah, I just truly think that it's a great opportunity for USC. I think for the fans, they're a little sad. I mean, I'm from the Bay Area, like I mentioned, and to have 2 Pac-12 teams where I could see away games in every sport, and just not have that anymore is a little sad, and I'm sure it'll grow on me as time goes on. But I think it's overall positive though, because you're sticking with UCLA and some of the rivals, and you're growing the attention on the program. So I think it's overall positive, but I see the criticisms too.
Yep.
So real quick, the schedule, Casey, we want to try and get you out of here as you've got class. You said I meant to ask you before we got started how long we could keep you around. We tried to keep this about 45 minutes, but you've been so awesome tonight and really bringing a unique perspective to the USC preview here. November 4th, USC will travel to Paris and open up the season against Ole Miss. They will host Notre Dame on the 23rd of November. December 21st, and I read a little bit about this online. Lindsey Gottlieb was very excited in the press release about this matchup at UConn on December 21st, and then UConn comes back the next year to Los Angeles. You'll play UCLA twice in the league, and then Illinois, and these are kind of what we think are top contenders. We may be off here a little bit, but Illinois, Michigan State, Ohio State, Nebraska travel to USC. USC will travel to IU, Iowa, and Maryland. So as you look at just kind of the schedule, again, we don't know. That's what Kathy and I have been texting back and forth, like, when's IU going to announce what the conference schedule is? I keep saying it's coming from the Big Ten. It's like, what's going on? But just of the schedule, kind of briefly before, as we try to get you out of here, games that you're excited about as you look to the schedule.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the obvious is UConn, because
Right.
you have two of the most dynamic players in college basketball head-to-head, and obviously it's a rematch of the Elite Eight last year. That was just so heartbreaking for Trojan fans, but also a really good indicator of what this team could be. I also think Notre Dame is a really good one, because Notre Dame and USC are such historical rivals, not so much in basketball, but more so in football, but also just Notre Dame is such a good program over there right now. And I think it speaks to kind of, the better you are, the more good out of conference games you're going to get. And so I think it's sort of a blessing and a curse, but I think those two for me, I'm really excited for. And I'm guessing Paris is going to be really exciting for the players. And I wonder how the travel fatigue will be like for them. We saw what happened with Florida State, and what would happen maybe if for football, and what would have happened maybe if that game was local, like in a different game. You'll never know with jet lag.
Too bad you can't go to that one and cover that game, right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Awesome. So those kind of, I think we'll segue here then to final thoughts. Hopefully you have a fun class coming up here. It'll be almost evening for you, I think, soon. So I think for me too, looking at that schedule, you got both USC and UCLA traveling over to Paris to kick off the women's basketball season there in early November. So what a great way. But I think you're right, Casey. It's hard not to look at that schedule and circle December 21st with that UConn matchup again. Especially being at UConn, that is going to be such a great test for USC, not just in terms of the rematch, but in terms of a great UConn team and the travel and being on a road. And we know a pretty strong, raucous environment that'll be going on at UConn. So I have to say, selfishly, from an Indiana fan, I'm very glad we get them at home at least. I don't know how much of a difference that will make for us in the end, to be honest, but we'll take every advantage that we can get, because I just look at USC and I think they're head to toe one of the most stacked teams that we have, and very complete teams that we have in the Big Ten, with our newcomers or one of our, quote unquote, original Big Ten teams, which who knows what those are anymore anyway. So, and not just in the Big Ten, but in nationally. I mean, they're preseason ranked number 2 for a reason. So I personally am, and selfishly, I'm glad they're in the Big Ten, just because now, hopefully with the Big Ten Network and Peacock and like you said, all the TV coverage and Fox, I'll get a chance to hopefully see them a little bit more than I was able to last year. So I think those are kind of my final thoughts, Jeff, if you want to wrap us up or do what you want to do.
Well, that's kind of interesting. Do what I do. Casey, I actually do have a question. I'll kind of wrap it up. I'll wrap up with the final thoughts here. I'm excited. Obviously, this is a very good team. Juju Watkins is a special talent, as I put in kind of the chat on the YouTube feed. But there's more to it. I mean, when you really start diving into the transfers and the recruits, if it all goes well, this could be a really great team. But I wanted to ask you this and kind of let you segue into your final thoughts as well, because I really hope it's not. But I think, at least from the outside, but with the team, is there kind of, Kathy asked it a little bit different way. Do you get the feeling it's like Final Four or bust is for the motto or the mantra of the season, or do they just kind of is Lindsey Gottlieb going to be able to keep them grounded enough of just focus one game at a time and be the best team he can be at the end of the year?
I personally, to be honest, I do think it's Final Four or bust, but I think Lindsey will do a good job of, like you said, keeping them grounded and not having that necessary. Because you got to remember, this isn't a perennially dominant team. And yes, they're coming off of one good year, but could they keep that up? That's the biggest question mark. And the short answer is probably yes with all the additions. But I think from a media landscape, like absolutely it is. You're ranked number 2 in the preseason. You have some of the best players in all the country. You're entering a Big Ten that just lost Caitlin Clark. Like you're coming at a good time. But nothing's a guarantee in college basketball or any sport. And so I think Lindsay, the way that she kind of takes up, the approach of one game at a time and one minute at a time and really breaking it down, I think that's going to be really good for USC. But I think, like, to be honest, like from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing and the amount of talk there is about the women's basketball team, like, yes, people do have expectations that if this team doesn't make the Final Four, maybe the Elite Eight, to be a little more generous, and make it where they were last year, like something was messed up. And I guess time will tell, but this team has such high expectations for a reason, and I can't see why they can't make it there. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Jeff, are we all wrapped up here? Do you have anything, any other things? All right. Real quick before you tell everybody what's next, Casey, just want to tell you thank you, number one, for being on the show. And number two, I know you are looking forward to trying to doing some play-by-play in your future. I totally think you have great qualities to do that. You've been fantastic on the show with us today. We're going to, at least for me, I'm going to keep my eye out for ESPN or Fox or wherever you end up landing and seeing if we can see you on the big screen someday. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate the kind words, and thank you so much for having me. I was excited when Jeff emailed me, and glad we could do it. So, yeah.
Casey, I'll echo, ditto, whatever the line would be for that Kathy just said. And hopefully, we don't do a lot of preview shows during the season because just the way the schedule goes, we usually do a post game show, and then But if we get an opportunity to get you back during the season, we'd love to have you on.
Oh, I'd be delighted to. Yeah, just hit my line and we'll arrange it.
All right. Yeah. Casey, I understand. We know you got to get to class, so if you want to go ahead and bug out of the studio while we kind of wrap up the last couple of minutes here, you're not offending us at all, so we understand that.
For sure, yeah. I thank you so much for having me, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Casey.
Have a good one. Bye.
So, as Kathy said, up next is our next show will be September the 11th. We're going to spotlight the Ohio State Buckeyes. They are the next highest ranked team in the way too early. Kathy, I forgot to write down, but I think they were number 15.
That sounds right in my head too, Jeff. So we'll go with that for now until we correct ourselves in 2 weeks.
And that's going to be an interesting team with a very good Cody McMahon back, but they lost some real talent. They lost J.C. Sheldon. They lost the girl that got drafted by the Fever, but and then eventually got
Was it Theory?
Theory, that's it. Thank you. So they've got some a little bit of roster turnover as well. So we're going to spotlight them on September 11th, and then we're going to starting the 11th. We'll be back every week, every Wednesday until the beginning of the season as we get ready to head. And hopefully, if we're lucky, by the 11th, we might be able to talk about the schedule a little bit too, in terms of when we're playing teams.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And if you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@, that's the @ Back Home Network. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Designs for designing our logos. Also, a big thank you to Bob Thompson and Jared Morris for the music you heard throughout the broadcast. And thank you for listening. And before I do wrap this up, Kathy, real quick, I know this is not an IU football podcast, but Big Ten or IU football, Coach Kurt Signetti opens up this Saturday. I got to admit, I'm kind of excited. Danny's down there. I'm going to go down and go to the game, and then we're going to bring him home afterwards. But I'm excited. How about you? What are your feelings about IU football, real quick, before we wrap it up here?
I'm tampered excitement. Like I think I have IU football PTSD, and so I'm just trying to keep myself down. But as we've gotten closer to the football season, I listen to a lot of other podcasts too. I keep listening to them, and some of the projections I'm hearing and all of the players and everything, it's starting to get a little contagious. So I'm trying really hard to keep myself from going too far overboard and saying, we're going to be 10-2 this year. So I'm not there. But I am definitely looking forward to watching them. I will miss them opening weekend. I'll be out of town, but I'm hoping to maybe catch them as we're traveling over. We're going to Chicago this weekend, so I might be able to watch them a little bit on my phone as we drive. So looking forward to it. That's for sure. I'm very intrigued by this team.
Yeah, I am too. So we want to thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you in 2 weeks, September the 11th, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
All right. We will go ahead and end that and say goodnight to everyone. So good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.